Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. I'm not sure if this is pro or not, but I got revenge on a jerk I used to volunteer firefight with. This happened around 2019 to 2020. I decided to join the local fire department as a volunteer firefighter. I did it for about 5 years, and it was great. Training was intense. 3 months of fire training, 2 nights a week and all day Saturday, followed by EMT training, another 3 months. After about a year, Captain Sarah asked me to help train new recruits. "We need experienced volunteers to show these rookies the ropes," she told me. "Think you're up for it?" "Absolutely, Captain," I replied. "Happy to help." Sarah was a compact, middle-aged woman with short gray hair who could make a grown man cry. She commanded both fear and respect wherever she went. One of those people who could switch from drill sergeant to mother hen in seconds. When she wasn't being tough, she was incredibly kind and generous. She'd regularly bring homemade cookies and cakes to different stations across our department. In this new academy class I helped with, there was this cocky kid we'll call Blake. During training, he'd constantly brag, "Just wait till I get out there, I'm gonna be the next great firefighter this department's ever seen." Blake talked big during training and acted like he was going to be some kind of action movie hero. He did okay in training, but wasn't nearly as good as he thought he was. He got assigned to Sarah's station, which was one of the quieter ones in the department. A few months after he started, Sarah visited my station one night. She brought us this massive chocolate cake from Sweet Cake's Bakery. It was their famous 7-layer masterpiece. "Thought you guys might want the leftovers," she said. "Took my crew out to dinner at Giovanni's last night." She explained how she'd treated her whole crew to dinner, which must have cost a fortune. She took about 8 people and bought this huge cake, too. They'd eaten a couple layers, so she brought us the rest. We were super grateful. These days, everyone's on Instagram and Facebook, but back then, Twitter was huge. I looked up some department folks and found Blake's profile. There were photos of him and the crew at Giovanni's with Sarah. Reading his tweets, though, made my blood boil. LOL just ordered the most expensive stuff on the menu, caused the Lil T's paying. Surf and turf plus top shelf drinks. She's so dumb she didn't even notice. Hash, free food, hash winning. This alone made me furious because Sarah was being incredibly generous. What an ungrateful punk. His profile was even worse. He had posts showing him posing in his gear, captioned with stuff like, "running into danger while others run away, hash hero, hash firefighter, hash courage," and "just another day saving lives." He'd reply to girls' posts with lines like, "Yeah, it's a tough job, but somebody's gotta do it. Maybe I can tell you about it over dinner." "You haven't even been to a real fire yet," I muttered at my screen. This guy had barely graduated from the academy, hadn't started EMT school, and hadn't seen any actual action. All he did was carry equipment for the real firefighters. So, here's what I did. I took screenshots of everything. His tweets about Sarah, all the fake hero stuff, everything. I printed multiple copies and distributed them to every station. We had these old-school pager systems with basic texting capability. I sent an anonymous department-wide message. "Check your mailboxes. See how our newest hero treats his lieutenant and what he really thinks about all of us." Within an hour, Blake had deleted all his tweets. By the next day, his account was gone. Good thing I'd saved those copies. He stopped showing up for shifts after that. About 3 weeks later, word got around that he'd quit. Eventually, I talked to Sarah and admitted what I'd done. "I couldn't stand how he treated you," I told her. "Thanks for having my back," she said quietly. I could tell it hurt her, but she bounced back quick. That's just who she was. Sarah ended up marrying one of the battalion chiefs who helped at the academy, Tom. Lost touch with her over the years, but last I heard, she was doing great. Still keeping rookies in line and baking treats for her crews. The next one is an entitled People's Story. I inherited my grandfather's farm when he passed away last year. It's a beautiful 40-acre property that's been in our family for 3 generations, sitting just outside of town. The farm has everything: a rustic farmhouse, a big red barn, fields of corn, and even a small apple orchard that my grandfather planted himself. Everything was peaceful until about 6 months ago when I got this official-looking letter in the mail. It was from something called the Whispering Meadows Homeowner Association, claiming I owed them $15,000 in unpaid homeowner association fees, late penalties, and fines for violations dating back 3 years. They threatened to put a lien on my property if I didn't pay up immediately. I was completely confused because this farm had never been part of any homeowner association. When I called the number on the letter, I got connected to this woman named Barbara, who spoke to me like I was some kind of idiot. "Your property is within our jurisdiction," she said in this condescending tone. "The previous owner never paid any dues. We've been very patient, but now we need to collect." The previous owner was my grandfather, I told her, and this farm has never been part of your homeowner association. We're not even in the same township as your development. Well, that's where you're wrong, Barbara snapped. Our homeowner association boundaries were expanded 5 years ago to include all properties within a 3-mile radius of Whispering Meadows. Your grandfather was notified but chose to ignore us. I knew this was complete nonsense. My grandfather kept meticulous records of everything related to the farm. I went through all his files and found nothing about any homeowner association. Plus, I'm pretty sure homeowner associations can't just arbitrarily claim properties miles away from their development. But Barbara wouldn't listen to reason. 2 weeks later, I got another letter threatening legal action. Then they started sending people to inspect my property. I'd catch them walking around taking pictures of my barn, my tractor, even peering in windows. When I confronted them, they'd claim they had every right to be there because they were homeowner association representatives. I'd had enough. I contacted a real estate lawyer named Steve who specialized in homeowner association disputes. When I showed him all the documentation, he actually laughed. "This is one of the most ridiculous cases I've seen," he said. "They have absolutely no legal authority over your property. An homeowner association can't just declare they own random properties outside their development. That's not how any of this works." Steve helped me draft a cease and desist letter, but the homeowner association ignored it. Instead, they escalated things by filing a lien against my property and starting foreclosure proceedings. They actually thought they could seize a family farm over fake homeowner association fees. That's when Steve suggested we go on the offensive. We filed a lawsuit against the homeowner association for harassment, making false claims, and attempting to fraudulently seize property. We also reported them to the state attorney general's office for investigation. During discovery, we found out what was really going on. The homeowner association was struggling financially because their development was half empty. They'd been trying to claim surrounding properties to collect more fees. They had actually targeted several other landowners in the area with similar fake claims. The court hearing was almost comical. Barbara showed up with this stack of documents that supposedly proved they had authority over my farm. But when the judge asked her to show exactly where and when this authority was granted, she couldn't produce anything legitimate. Their proof was basically some maps they'd drawn themselves with expanded boundaries and a bunch of letters they'd sent to property owners declaring them part of the homeowner association. The judge was not amused. He dismissed their lien and foreclosure attempts immediately. Then he granted our countersuit, ordering the homeowner association to pay my legal fees and damages for harassment. He also referred the case to the district attorney for possible criminal fraud charges. But the best part came during the state investigation. Turns out Barbara and several other homeowner association board members had been embezzling money from their actual homeowner association members for years. They were trying to claim outside properties to cover up their financial mismanagement. The whole board ended up being removed and charged with fraud. These days, things are peaceful again at the farm. The new homeowner association board at Whispering Meadows sent me a formal apology and admitted they have no claim whatsoever to my property. I still get a laugh thinking about how they thought they could just declare ownership of a century-old family farm because they drew some new lines on a map. I've put up security cameras and no trespassing signs just in case any other homeowner association gets similar ideas. But mostly, I'm just grateful my grandfather kept such good records. He always said good documentation saves you from bad situations. Guess he was right about that, like he was about most things. The whole experience taught me that some people will try anything if they think they can get away with it. But it also showed me that the law still works if you stand up for yourself and get the right help. My grandfather would be proud that I protected his farm from these scammers. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got some apples to pick. Those trees my grandfather planted are having their best season yet. The next one is a petty revenge story. I work in R&D in my company. I usually don't get involved too much in deals like suppliers and manufacturers. That's a different department. But my team and I have been working on a project that made it more necessary for me to get involved in the finer details of a big manufacturing deal. We are wrapping up the project, and I found out that someone high up in the manufacturing department has been meeting with the other company without me and was going to basically take credit for all my team's work. It isn't a huge deal for me, but it could affect bonuses for some of my employees. So today I talked to the COO who told me that they recognized that my team did the work and deserve credit, but that it was going to be easier at this point to just let the other person handle the deal. I was okay with this because we got the credit, but it was a load off my plate and I have other things to do. But then this prick has the nerve to ask where he can take the clients for lunch. He didn't say who, but I knew they were coming to town, so it wasn't hard to figure out. So I told him about a new restaurant that is opening. It should be a nice place for them after a long flight. The restaurant? Twin Peaks. If you don't know, it's kind of like a Hooters ripoff. After lunch, they came by the office and I made sure to say hi. They were clearly not impressed, and their CTO even made a comment that he wished I was handling things because he didn't like the other guy's style. They were clearly uncomfortable with his choice in restaurant, and he had some glares for me as well. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I, 22M, am the primary caretaker of one of my family members. Among other chronic illnesses, she is a diagnosed narcissist with early dementia. As per my family's request, I moved with her and took an online job as a trilingual translator to ensure I would be there 24/7 should she have an emergency. Somehow, she has interpreted my constant presence as me not having a job, despite me explaining several times that I did, in fact, work. She went to the point of stealing my ID and debit card, saying she would not be giving them back to me unless I gave out resumes where she told me to. I have searched the whole house and couldn't find them, so I was forced to comply. I have a huge amount of respect for people who work in these fields, but I am not taking a job as a cleaner or a cashier when I work in my field of choice. That's when I noticed all the places she was forcing me to send out resumes to were requesting a cover letter. This is where the malicious compliance takes place. I took an already written cover letter and changed some details so it'd be like I wrote it myself. I made her read it and approve it as per her request, then added the following sentences in my second paragraph. If this letter arrives on your desk, please know that this application has been sent without my consent. Already having an online full-time job, please do not take it into consideration. As you can imagine, I didn't get called back much. Only one place sent me an email, and once I explained the situation, their HR team wished me luck with my situation and told me this motivated them to read cover letters more carefully. At the same time, I contacted my boss. I knew they sometimes open in-office positions, and my boss is one of the nicest people I know, so I contacted her and asked if there was any way I could get the next in-office position, telling her why exactly I was asking that. I've been working there for 6 months, and she never had any complaints about me, so she sent me a permanent contract starting in January 2025 for their office. It's overseas in a country where I'm legally allowed to work without a work visa. I won't specify which country, since I have the intention of disappearing there. My flight is already booked, and only my best friend knows what is going on. I have a letter already written out where I tell my family to not warn the authorities. As soon as I land, my bank account will be closed and my phone subscription canceled, and after 5 years, I will ask to become a citizen in that country and won't renew the paperwork necessary to prove my citizenship in my birth country. I have 3 younger siblings. All of them are still in middle school. They have their own email addresses that our parents don't know about, so I will send them an email telling them this is not their fault and that they're the only ones in the family who are allowed to contact me. I'll also add that I will answer to any questions they have once they turn 18. I'm excited. I'm excited to start a new life. I'm excited to get out of this family who has been the source of most of my problems for my whole life. I'm excited to finally escape toxic people in a toxic environment that was destroying my mental health. Only 2 months left, and after 22 long years of waiting, I'll finally be free. All of this because my last straw was forcing me to send out job applications. The next one is an entitled people's story. I was in hospital and ended up being put in the observation unit because no specialist beds were available. The OBS unit is a catch-all ward where patients are put if they're not in imminent danger but need regular monitoring. It's bright and extremely noisy, so nobody can sleep well. Unfortunately, Biscuit Karen arrives at 10 p.m. on day 1. Why is she called Biscuit Karen? Because she wants a biscuit and she's shouting this loudly enough for the whole OBS unit to hear. Never mind the time or that we're mostly trying to sleep. Never mind that her blood sugar is 8.5, elevated, and she's diabetic, so she really doesn't need more sugar. But hey-ho, the long-suffering nurses find her a biscuit and ask her to be quiet. Biscuit Karen does not quieten down because shouting is her default setting, and she doesn't seem to notice that other patients exist. After 10 minutes of solid noise pollution, she wants another biscuit. The nurses give it to her. More noise. Then another 15 minutes later, she calls for another biscuit. The nurses are occupied, so nobody answers her immediately. So she shouts her request louder, as if we all hadn't heard her already. This is where the nurses begin to lose patience. She is told to be quiet, and her blood sugar level is mentioned. However, Biscuit Karen insists, so she's given another ducking biscuit. Maybe the nurses drug this one because Biscuit Karen soon goes to sleep and snores loudly. This was a taste of what was to come, but nobody on the obese unit knew it yet. Day 2, 11 p.m. Biscuit Karen has been okay all day, and nothing much appears to be wrong with her. She has a walking aid and can get herself to the toilet, but she doesn't want to. She calls a nurse to put her on the commode. A very blunt nurse points out that she's seen Karen walking, so she's not going to help her. The toilet is only 10 meters away. Biscuit Karen does not accept this. She keeps shouting for a nurse to help her. Eventually, the blunt nurse goes to check, and Biscuit Karen has actually wet herself in her passive-aggressive rage. The nurse is shocked and is telling Biscuit Karen off. Biscuit Karen does not care. Meanwhile, the bed is now sodden and the sheets have to be changed. The blunt nurse helps put Biscuit Karen on the commode and then goes to get the spare sheets. Unfortunately for the nurses, other patients are being equally tricky. There's the alcoholic man who can't walk but keeps trying and falling to the floor, the polar opposite of our anti-heroine, and a woman with the broken neck who constantly takes off her nightgown and tries to go wandering. All the nurses are kept busy rounding up the strays and inevitably forget about the abandoned Biscuit Karen left sitting on the commode. Biscuit Karen ensures that she's not neglected for long. "Can somebody help me?" ricochets repeatedly around the OBS unit, to the dismay of all the people trying to sleep. Eventually it becomes, "Somebody help me, my back hurts." Of all the disruptive behavior happening on the OBS unit, she's by far the loudest, the most persistent, and the most obnoxious, because she caused her own discomfort in the first place. I'm peeved, and so is everyone else. Blunt nurse gets back to her and an argument starts. She's cross as she's needlessly making the bed. Biscuit Karen is angry that she's been left in an uncomfortable sitting position. In fact, she's getting more aggressive by the second, and eventually she slaps the nurse. Blunt nurse doesn't put up with this nonsense. She abandons making the bed, leaves Biscuit Karen on timeout, still on the commode, and ignores all shouted demands to come back. She tells the other irate patients that she's not risking further aggression, and we all agree with her in solidarity. Blunt nurse was true to her word, so eventually deeply compassionate nurse tried her luck making the bed. Unfortunately for DC nurse, Biscuit Karen is a raging racist, true to stereotype, and she not only calls her the N-word, but also tells her to go back to where she came from. DC nurse nopes out that point, whilst blunt nurse calls security. Biscuit Karen has begun yelling every few seconds, "I want my phone, where is my phone?" still from the commode, presumably so she can enact her threats. "I'm going to report you, I'm going to get you fired." The nurses aren't stupid though, so nobody gives Biscuit Karen her phone. It doesn't occur to Biscuit Karen to get off the commode and find her own phone. Meanwhile, the other patients have hit their bullcrap saturation point and have started yelling at Biscuit Karen to shut up. It's past 12 a.m. and nobody can go to sleep yet. At this point, the cries from Biscuit Karen change to, "Somebody help me," every 3 seconds, over and over again. The nurses are unmoved. There is a torrent of reactive verbal abuse from the other patients, but Biscuit Karen doesn't seem to hear them. In fact, she has completely devolved into a pathetic toddler tantrum, except toddlers have more self-respect, and she stays immersed in her self-pity for a long time. Meanwhile, 1 a.m. rolls around. Security officers take their time to arrive, but when they do, they are met with what appears to be a distressed old lady, who claims that the nurses are hurting her and that DC nurse actually hit her. An audacious lie. However, Biscuit Karen is too dysregulated to keep the facade up for long and morphs back into a spiteful and aggressive harpy when blunt nurse goes back to fix the bed. The security officers see exactly why they were called and try to keep the peace whilst the bed is finally finished. There's not much two thick-set men can do with a small old woman perched on a commode, but they tried. Eventually, Biscuit Karen starts demanding her medication, and somebody comes up with the bright idea of calling an accident and emergency doctor. Who can quell the entitled savagery of the enraged Karen? Of course, it would be a young, handsome, confident male doctor, the very epitome of a rescuer to an old idiot who's trying to play the victim. When he turns up, Biscuit Karen becomes a sweet and compliant old lady, answering "Yes, doctor, no doctor." She does try to repeat her lie about being assaulted, but several patient statements, 2 jaded nurses, and 2 exiting security personnel proved otherwise. The doctor gave Biscuit Karen her meds, she was helped to bed, and she fell asleep. Meanwhile, the rest of the patients on the OBS unit were too high on adrenaline to feel drowsy, so we were condemned to further wakefulness. I was glad to leave the next day. The next one is an entitled parent's story. My family have been working as invigilators, exam supervisors for the state's education department for years. My mom does it, my sister does it, my ex-wife did it. It only comes up for 2.5 weeks per year as they are only needed for the end-of-year exams for those in their final year of school. This year I got roped into doing it as well due to a general shortage of supervisors. I was at the today's exam when the chief supervisor, who happens to be my mother, comes up to me with an unbelievable story. My sister, working at a different high school, was approached by one of the teachers asking for a copy of the psychology exam booklet. Here's the thing. Teachers aren't allowed to ask for them. A supervisor must drop a copy off at the school's reception desk. I should know because I've done it every exam I worked. Later, another teacher turns up. You may notice the lack of quotation marks with this second teacher. That's because it is the school's only psychology teacher who knew better than to ask for a copy of the book. This legitimate teacher showed up only at the end of the exam to see how her students went, I think. Those details were omitted due to the nature of the following information. It turns out the first teacher wasn't a teacher at all, but did work at the school. She was after a copy of the exam because her son was taking it, and she wanted it for reasons. Even if she did obtain a copy, it would have been too late, as she wouldn't have been allowed into the exam hall to give her kids the answers. She had no way of contacting her son, as phones, smart watches, and smart glasses were prohibited items not to be taken into the hall. Moreover, given the complex nature of some of the questions, I have a psychology degree and was confused by some, she would have spent more time researching the answers than the length of the exam. So, even if she somehow mastered all the intricacies of psychology in mere hours, it would have been pointless, particularly as there was no way she could have relayed the information as previously mentioned. Now, this woman's job is very much in jeopardy, and her son will likely receive an automatic fail, regardless of how well he performed. This blemish on his record will also likely follow him when he applies for any university. There are only 4 in our city, denying him the chance to do whatever it was he wanted. His mother's belief the rules didn't apply to her has effectively doomed her son, though she will likely never see it this way. Sorry I couldn't go into more detail. That's as much information as I received. Also, have to leave for work. Farewell. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.